Hi, Journeyers. I'm Tony Carnes, your host for A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. Today, we have an old friend, Joe Holland. If you might remember, he's a writer, he's an entrepreneur, he's a lawyer, he's a minister. And right now, he's got a new book out, and I think it's a really fine one. Welcome to the program, Joe.
It's great being here, Tony. And I'm excited, not only because I love being on the show talking with you, but also about my new book. It's something that I've been working on for decades, and to see it come to life is really thrilling.
You know, I was looking through your book and reading it. It's called Make Your Own History, Timeless Truths from Black American Trailblazers. And as I read through it, I said, this is a fine book. This is a great book. You've done such a good job. And if you want to work on improving your lives while at the same time progressing the nation by being inspired by the virtues as practiced by African American exemplars through American history, this is a book that's going to be really helpful. And I really do thank you for doing it. Did I get the book right there?
It's a great summary that you gave, because this book really is a blend of my passion for history and my passion for helping people. And it dates back, and I say I've been working on it for decades because I was a history major. Then I went on to get my master's in history with a focus on African American history. And I've been passionate about the study since then. So I've been able to bring that passion alongside of my passion for self-help, for personal improvement, for reaching out and making a difference. And this book is about both those themes, bringing them together.
Well, speaking about memory, before we go any further, I'd like for you to look back into your pre-college life, high school and before. Is there any person or event or lesson that you learned then or you remember now that you look back and re-examine and meditate on and says, wow, I learned a lot from that?
Perseverance is one of the virtuous themes in the book. Each chapter is after a virtue, and perseverance is one of those. And I learned that in high school. I was a football player, and I came to my high school, Roosevelt High School in Yonkers, New York, as a junior in high school because we had just moved in. My family had been living abroad, and because we got in too late for me to go to preseason camp, I couldn't. The coach's rule was if you don't go to camp, you can't start in a game. I was one of the best players, at least I felt I was on the team, but yet I was coming off the bench. I was a super sub. I played, but not much. And I had to persevere through that. And I had to keep working hard. I didn't give up. I trained as hard as I possibly could. And so the next year, my senior year, I made high school All-American. I set the county rushing record. And I was able to fulfill my dream of really making a difference on the football field. It was only because I learned that lesson of perseverance. And I've actually carried that on through my other experiences.
You saw it pay off, and
yes.
that sort of reinforces to keep persevering. You know, I'm also struck by another thing in your life. Almost every project you work with, you go back to your experience with the homeless in Harlem, because you work with the homeless through Hark Homes.
That's right.
And it's almost like that's your born-again experience. Maybe not spiritually, necessarily, but it's like it's such a touchstone for you. It's like you sort of, by working with the homeless in Harlem, you sort of made a starting point for yourself, a way that's influenced you ever since. Is that right? Or because it just seems so powerful in your own life, because you always come back to that.
It was the seminal experience. I like your word touchstone, but I want to take it as that seminal, that seed being planted, because I wasn't from Harlem. I came there after I finished Harvard Law School because God had laid it on my heart. The key scripture was Luke 12:48, to whom much is given, much is required. And I had been blessed, and God laid it on my heart. I had to put myself in a position to bless others. And that's why I started the homeless shelter. But it wasn't just about food, clothing, and shelter for those who didn't have it. It was about holistic housing, finding a way to bring transformation to their lives. And I discovered it was from biblically based success principles, life skills that I could impart through daily Bible studies that made a difference. That was the seed that was planted in their lives that caused them to rise up and be transformed. And then that became that seed of understanding that, hey, this worked for the homeless. I can go forward and take these principles and have them work for anybody. One of my favorite sayings is that tools that work on broken down vehicles work just as well as to fix up a well-running vehicle.
Well, I definitely need some tools for my old broken down vehicle. But also, I know that many of the people you worked with then maybe felt they were broken down, beat down, but you had a particular experience with Charles that sort of set the framework for what this book, how this book is supposed to work. Can you tell us a little bit about your experience with Charles and how his life changed?
There are so many experiences, but I'm glad that you highlighted Charles, because I saw lives transformed in so many ways. But this was an individual who had been homeless because he was drug addicted. This was during the 1980s. It was the crack cocaine era. And so he had the drug addiction, had spent his rent money, ended up out on the street, came to the shelter, and our rule was you have to get sober. And the way you do that is through discipline. One of the principles in my new book is the self-discipline principle. And so it was through that self-discipline. It was also through teamwork, another one of the principles in this book, that we were able to give Charles the support that he needed to overcome his drug addiction. And that was the self-confidence booster. And then he was able to go on and get a job, get his own place, and attain the self-sufficiency and productivity and independence that was really the desire of his heart.
You know, you gave him a quote or a passage from Langston Hughes, was it? Or it was somebody, and you also wrote a saying from Martin Luther King on that sheet of paper. Do you remember that incident where you, and that sort of became his play. He read that over and over, and it became the new narrative for his life. I was really impressed because that's what you do in this book. You provide some stories and you say, hey, you can make this into your narrative. Can you recall that incident?
The quote from King that I gave him, it was on one of those nights he was struggling and he had like fallen back. And the quote from King, whatever you are, if you are a street sweeper, resolve to be the best street sweeper ever, right? And that really touched Charles. And you mentioned Langston Hughes. He has a poem called Harlem, which starts, what happens to a dream deferred? Does it dry up like a raisin in the sun, or fester like a sore and then run? Does it stink like rotten meat, or crust and sugar over like syrupy sweet? Maybe it sags like a heavy load, or does it explode? And I gave that to Charles, and he meditated on both the King quote and the Hughes poem, and that became, as he meditated and memorized it, that became the inner strength that he needed, because his dreams had been deferred, and he understood that he had to hold on, to the dream.
Later on in your book, you call that the rising up strategy of Langston Hughes. What a great way of saying it. And Hughes was just talking about his dream as sort of shattered, deferred, more than deferred, blocked. And yet, he says, hold fast, because it'll transform your life and it'll also transform the nation. He has a sort of a quote you use in there from that poem, Hold Fast.
That quote is, hold fast to dreams, for without them, life is a broken-winged bird that cannot fly. So Hughes really answers his own question.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I write in this book, and that's what I told homeless men like Charles. Yes, dreams are deferred, and what happens to them, all kinds of bad things, but yet hold fast to dreams. Then you will soar. Then you will soar. You won't be that broken-winged bird that cannot fly, but you will soar like an eagle on the wings of your dreams.
And Hughes said, eventually, you're going to find victory in that. And that's also his message to the nation. Because this book is about both personal self-help and, shall we say, national self-help. That the nation is hurting. It's one thing, it's lost its optimism. You talk a lot about, you have a whole section on optimism. In that section on optimism, besides Hughes, but there were others. Are there others in that section that really moved you a lot?
Yes, Tony, and one of the reasons that I decided to write this book, it speaks to the point that you just made, is the suffering that we're going through socially, the divisiveness, the tension that we're suffering. And there are so many historical role models, and I just have just a fraction of them. There are 120 in the book, but that's just a fraction of those who have faced greater obstacles than we are facing right now, than individuals have right now, but yet, they're able, to rise up. Why? Because they have the right values, they have the right principles, they have the right ethics. And if we as a nation can start living as the founders had ordained, as a nation based on moral principles and social ethics, then we can rise up and conquer our problems. One of the optimist trailblazers that I have in the book is Benjamin Banneker. Mm-hmm. And he was a black man and this was in the 1700s, right? But he was able to gain his freedom, and he became one of the leading scientists and inventors of his era.
Yes.
Yeah, and with amazing accomplishments. And he had the stature that at one point he didn't like something that Thomas Jefferson said. This was in the 1790s. He felt that, it was, insensitive and wrong about African-American people. But he didn't care that Jefferson was Secretary of State and a leader at that time, that he spoke the truth from his heart. And so, it's about accomplishment in your profession, but Banneker shows that when you're living by values and principles, that you will speak those out and let the society know, let the nation know that these are important to live by.
Do we know, did Thomas Jefferson answer him? Or do we know what that was?
There was some let's say, controversy, back and forth, but Banneker held by his words.
Well, that's what over and over impresses me in this book, is that you cannot know yourself as an American unless you know the African American part of that, being an American. And I don't think you can know about yourself as a Christian in America, if you're a Christian, unless you know about the African American part of that Christian, because African Americans are an essential ingredient. Their history, their words, their character, their values are essential. It's not just the music. Music is great, and it does tell us a lot. But it's the fact that America is made in interaction with African Americans, and it's so deep. And if you read this book, you just keep saying, oh, I see myself in that. Oh, I know that. Oh. And all of a sudden you realize that even though the book is focused on Black American, African American trailblazers, it's also about American trailblazers, because they trailblazed for America to realize its highest ideals. Now, you're not just all history here. You have some people that are practicing these things today. For example, just this last week, we had a person that is in your book practicing one virtue, probably many virtues, but one virtue you highlight, and that is Simone Biles, which, by the way, I found a mistake in your book.
Well, I have to correct this, right? Go ahead. I want to hear this. I got to correct this.
You say she's had 30 world medals, if in gymnastic medals, but she's won a few since you made that statement. You can't keep up with her.
One of the amazing things about this book, The Trailblazers of Courage, she is one of them. Simone Biles is one of those. And it's the courage that I write about in her example, not only to be affirmative and to go forward and say, yes, I'm going to keep going no matter, what happens, have the strength to do that. But Tony, sometimes it's the courage to say no. And she had the courage to do that in the 2020 Olympics, where she was feeling what they call in gymnastic the twisters, is feeling some dizziness. And even though she had those around her saying, oh, Simone, we need you. You need to go forth and compete. She had the courage to say no, to take care of herself. And you know what has happened? She was able to get herself together, make a comeback. And to your point, after I wrote about this courageous trailblazer, she's gone on and just recently
and your book out of date.
Won these medals, and she's the most decorated of all time. So I don't mind having an era like that, because it does speak to the power of the principle that she's living out.
Now, I got to say, when she decided to take time out, I thought, in some ways, that was a big mistake. I thought, oh my gosh, how is she ever going to get back into it? Because, gymnastics, you've only got a certain window. When she made that decision, did you think, oh, maybe she's making a mistake? Or did you say, oh, that's good?
No, I didn't think she was making a mistake. Why? Because I had studied her as an example of courage and determination, and somebody who understood what the value of living a life of principle, because she came from humble beginnings. Very humble beginnings.
She was
a foster child. Foster child, and then she had to live with other relatives and move to another place. And so she worked through all that, had success, and kept building on that success. And because she lived a life of ethics and values and success principles, I knew that she was going to come back. And in fact, I didn't know she was going to come back even better than she was before, but I knew she was going to come back and succeed.
Well, in fact, it's a credit to the paradigm of your book, is her saying no, the courage in her case to say no, actually made her stronger, because those moves she makes takes a lot of courage to do. Some of those that she's just, I've looked, I'm sure everybody has looked at slow motion, and you think that when she makes uses the vault to twist around and land and then go over and do all her flips, you say that looks impossible and also dangerous. And she did that. I think she did that particular vault at least twice, maybe 3 times, and she got better each time. Because the first time her leg popped up a little bit, even though it was almost impossible thing
Her
to do.
entry, Tony, is entitled "Possess the Courage to Soar."
Yeah.
And that speaks to your point. And I'd just like to quickly go to the selection in the book.
Yes, please do.
Because each section has a short biographical piece that talks about the trailblazer like Simone Biles. But then there are success principles. And I have 4 for her. Illuminate your dreams, insist on your best, include wise advisors, inspire the kids. And this is a quote that falls under the principle, insist on your best. These are the words of Simone Biles. A successful competition for me is always going out there and putting 100% into whatever I'm doing. It's not always winning. People, I think, mistake that it's just winning. Sometimes it could be, but for me, it's hitting the best sets I can, gaining confidence, and having a good time and having fun. I love this from Simone because she's really putting the right perspective on the success journey. It's about, hey, whether I want or not, I've got to do my best. I've got to commit myself to excellence. I've got to give my all to whatever it is I'm doing. And if I do that, whether I want or not, I've succeeded.
And you also, in this way, you also point out that many of the people that you show as being exemplary, it's because they really actually thought about what they're doing. And then they put that into practice. And that whole book is all about your thinking about these and how you can put them in practice in your life. And you've got these really inspirational figures. You know, you also mention a very interesting thing. We're talking a lot about memory here, but you also pick up one woman who says, be careful. Sometimes your memory can trap you. Sometimes you've got to say, have the courage, she didn't use that word, but the courage to say no. Do you remember who I'm talking about? I believe that's
Georgia Douglas Johnson.
Johnson, yes, that's right.
Yeah, a trailblazer of optimism. She was a writer during the period called the Holland Renaissance. And this is an important historical note because this is really the centennial of the Harlem Renaissance.
That's right.
Because it rose in the 1920s. So we're talking about 100 years ago, this African-American woman trailblazed in her writing. She had over 200 poems and 40 books, and I mean, she was just prolific.
She wrote plays also,
and
right?
she wrote plays as well. And she was so well known that her home was known as a salon for these African-American writers and others to gather. And if I can, you mentioned a poem. I'd like to go to Georgia Douglas Johnson now, because in her selection, there are 3 success principles: beware the memories, break through the bars, build your soul. And
maybe you could do beware the memories and build your soul, just for time's sake.
These are the words here of Georgia Douglas Johnson. There's nothing in the world that clings as does a memory that stings, while happy hours fade and pass like shadows in a looking glass. And now let me go down to her poem, Under the Principle, Build Your Soul. I've learned of life this bitter truth. Hope not between the crumbling walls of mankind's gratitude find repose, but rather build within thy own soul fortresses. So you have to understand with Georgia Douglas Johnson, she was writing these poems. Yes, they have literary value, but they were speaking truths into the lives, not only in individuals, but in the life of the nation, so that we could go forward and be better people and a better country.
There's so many great people you picked. You got Oprah Winfrey in more contemporary. But I'm wondering, how did you decide who to pick, and who did you leave out that you say, oh, I wish I had kept them in?
One of the most difficult challenges that I had in writing this book was deciding, who to include. And it really went down to not only the person's examples, but the person's words. Because in each of these entries, I quote what these individuals are saying, because the subtitle is Timeless Truths from Black American Trailblazers. These are truths from them that we can take and understand and meditate and apply to our own lives.
Make your own history. Do it in a way that enhances the virtues in your life and those all around you, even our nation. This is really a terrific book. I am so thankful that you've done this book. Huge amount of work, and it is definitely worth a read. So, audience, you may think this doesn't apply to you. It does. Thank you very much. Thank you, Joe, for being with us.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. This has been a real blessing to be able to share with you and your audience about this work.
Thank you, Journeyers. My name's Tony Carnes from A Journey Through NYC Religions Television. Goodbye.